Honorable Prime Minister, Madam President, Excellencies, may I first of all thank Madam President for facilitating this very important discussion. It is common ground that we human beings are exploiting the resources of the planet in a way which is unacceptable. We appear to present a timid response to the clearing of forests, the filling of wetlands, a serious interference with the biodiversity, an unimaginable exploitation of the planet's resources, melting of the ice caps and the extinction of the fauna and flora, all leading to one thing, and that is climate change. My dear friends, all this we do without appreciating the fact that we are at war with our own planet, a war which we are surely on the losing side. It has virtually become common rhetoric, almost to the point of complacency, that we, as a matter of fact, breathe polluted air, consume food that is toxic, consume water that is contaminated, that we accept the rising sea levels as a fact of life. We even accept extreme climate change with an interesting expression, an ice bomb or a winter bomb. Madam President, interestingly, it seems that we are leaving a legacy of a severely wounded planet to our future generations. It must be appreciated that environmental impact is not merely the loss of beautiful landscape, but what it means is the basic requirement to sustain life, which is, on a continuous basis, severely compromised. Today, as we struggle with COVID-19, it is clear that non-traditional security threats such as climate change are becoming greater in scope and magnitude in the 21st century. In this context, Sri Lanka welcomes the convening of this timely open debate to discuss the role of the Security Council, of member states and the UN in addressing future threats to international peace and security posed by climate change. Excellencies, before discussing the role of global climate governance with relevance to international legal framework, let me refer to a quote by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, who captured the issue as far back as in 2009 very succinctly when he said, quote, "Just as our banking sector is struggling with its debts and paradoxically also facing cause for a return to the old, so-called old-fashioned traditional banking, so is nature's life support systems, which are failing to cope with the debts we have built up in our quest for development. So if we don't face up to this, then nature, the biggest bank of all, will go bust." Close quotes. A very timely observation. We are aware that the UNFCCC sets out binding limits on greenhouse gas emissions. The Kyoto Protocol of 1997 has binding obligations for developed countries to control greenhouse emissions, which was followed by the 2010 conference, which decided that global warming should be limited to below 2 degrees centigrade. And in 2015, the Paris Agreement was adopted, bringing emission reduction from 2020 onwards to a lowering target of 1.5 degrees centigrade. Excellencies, it is important to also remember that the Paris Agreement has a bottom-up structure in contrast to the international law treaties, which are top-down, with the characteristics that it has standards and targets set internationally for countries to achieve. It is heartening to note that unlike the Kyoto Protocol, which sets targets and have legal force, the Paris Agreement is dependent upon consensus building and voluntariness in achieving targets that are decided nationally. It is further heartening to recall that in 2015, developed countries committed themselves to about $100 billion annually in climate finance and further agreed to maintain it at a level of $100 billion a year until the year 2025. However, it is perhaps regrettable to note that a large number of the major developing industrialized nations were not living up to their pledges, nor met the emission reduction targets, and in any event have not been able to keep the rise of global temperatures well below the 2 degrees centigrade. It is said that the Earth has never in its history had a quasi-stable state that it is around 2 degrees centigrade warmer than the pre-industrial period, and suggests that there is a substantial risk in that the system itself will want to continue warming because of these processes, even if we stop emissions. It is therefore important to appreciate that simply reducing emissions will not do, but we will have to do something much more. As James Hansen, a former NASA scientist and a climate expert, observed, that most of the agreements unfortunately consist of promises or aims and not commitments. As an island country that has faced adverse effects or an adverse impact of climate change, Sri Lanka, having ratified the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC, advocates that climate-related agreements need to be respected and upheld in adherence to differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. This, I say, is pivotal to ensure comprehensive climate security and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Excellencies, consequences of climate change such as temperature rise, rainfall variability, and sea level rise are critically affecting almost all economic sectors globally. Occurrences of natural disasters due to extreme weather conditions, such as prolonged droughts, flash floods, and landslides, deprive lives and livelihoods of the global community. Sri Lanka believes that building resilience of vulnerable communities and ecosystems over climate change effects within a broader framework of sustainable development should be our priority. Recognizing this responsibility, the government of Sri Lanka has launched a national adaptation plan for climate change impacts in Sri Lanka, which has identified agriculture, fisheries, water, human health, coastal and marine ecosystems and biodiversity, infrastructure and human settlements as the most vulnerable sectors to the adverse effects of climate change. It provides the opportunity for the stakeholders for developing policies, strengthen cooperation, facilitate institutional building, resources mobilization, technology development and transfer, promote awareness and capacity building, and to increase resilience of vulnerable communities in several areas and sectors in the country. In implementing the provisions of the National Adaptation Plan for Climate Change, as in the case of Sri Lanka, external support for further strengthening and action is of great significance. As such, Sri Lanka calls on the United Nations system for the provision of assistance to developing countries in combating the challenges including finance, technology transfer and capacity building. This would, in my respectful view, be a starting point for preventing climate-related security risks. Madam President, our fight against climate change and consolidating security should be a collective effort in partnership with governments, the private sector, civil society, academia, youth, women, and indigenous communities. While commending the efforts of the Security Council in this endeavor, Sri Lanka looks forward to COP26 in Glasgow this year to unite the globe to tackle climate change. Madam President, I wish you every success in leading the Security Council during your tenure of office. Thank you.